Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Happy Parents Weekend. My name is Sterling Wilder, and I'm a member of the class of 1983, which is the same as Rob. And we're much younger than Carl, who's class of 82. We're not going to talk about Susanna, because she's really young, so we'll let you hear about that later. But my job today is a really fun one. I'm the Director of Alumni Affairs, and I've been invited to come participate in this and to start off the panel by telling you a little bit about what we're trying to do with the Alumni Association with the help of these folks and Cameo Hearts from the Career Center, and of course the help of Jim Thompson, who runs the Duke in LA program. So one of the really cool parts of my job, other than going to a lot of events and introducing famous and fabulous Duke alums, is also to think about ways to connect Duke people to other Duke people, whether they're alums to alums or students to alums. And so we've taken a program that was called Duke in Hollywood that Carl actually did create with another one or two Duke alums in the 80s, and we have revived it, and we're calling it the Arts, Media, and Entertainment Network. And it's not just alums in the industry in LA, but all around the world. And we have a list that we're working on and thinking about putting together. Our first event actually will be in LA, hopefully in January. So what's the point? Well, there are so many alums who are in the industry all across the board in different ways and capacities and different levels. And so we're trying to think, okay, how can we use these folks? These guys have had a great weekend being back on campus, being with each other, but also being with the students. And that's been really fun. So we think about it as programming, so they can come to campus for a few days, lecture at classes, meet with students, meet with you all, talk to people about their careers, right? But also we have the Duke in LA program that Jim runs, and we have alums who are out in LA who want to provide internships for his students. They keep saying, how can we help? We want to speak to the class. We want to be part of the program. We want to be part of their lives while they're out in LA. So that's another great way to do it. We also have a Duke in New York program and all other opportunities to provide internships for students that Cameo is going to help us work on. So that's one. So it's the internships, it's the programming, but also it's mentorship. So what's it like to be a screenwriter like Carl, be a famous screenwriter? What's your life like? How do you make life choices? So it's not just career, but it's also life advice. And then also, too, it's a great way to provide networking for these folks across industry so that you can figure out who are the other Duke people and meet and talk to them and find out what they're doing in their career. And also, it's a great way to also provide other social connections. So those are the things that we're trying to do, and you'll hear more about that later on, hopefully. And if your students want to know more about that, please let us know, because we're really trying to help build that. So my job is to introduce Jim Thompson, and he sent me an intro, and it's really not.
That was supposed to be funny.
I know, but I was going to read it. I was going to read it, but I decided not to embarrass him when he talks about how he's really funny and he doesn't. So, but I will tell you that he actually is. He can be really funny, but he's worried if he makes a joke and no one laughs, that it'll be bad today. So
because I said if you say that, then that's going to happen. And now you said that. So.
And I would never want to humiliate you. But the really important. The really important thing that you should know is that Jim has run the Duke in LA program for over 10 years. He is a terrific mentor, leader of that program into the Duke students who were there, and provides just a great experience for the program. He is really fun. He's also just a really good guy, is a family attorney. I call him divorce attorney to the stars, but we're not supposed to talk about that.
My line was better.
Your line, okay, his line was, what was that? Oh, been an LA attorney for 20 years. Oh, wait, no, what was that? Oh, set up his own practice divorcing celebrities on the D list. He does, however, have some famous people, some of whom don't do really nice things for a living. So when we're in a restaurant in LA, I don't like to ever be near an open window or near a door. I like to be in a corner where I can look out and see who's coming in after him. So. Just as a note to self.
Are you trying to convince them to send their students out under my care?
Right. It's just when he's out in restaurants that there's a worry about that. But he does have a law degree from Pepperdine. He grew up on the East Coast in Richmond. Will never leave the West Coast, I think now. Even has moved his mother out there, and also has done a lot of film work, everything but his dissertation at USC in critical thinking. And he loves critical. Visual arts. What was it? Film critical studies. Sorry. It's been and had not had enough caffeine. But the other thing is he really does do a great job with the program, and that's the most important part. And you're going to introduce our panelists, and we're going to go from there.
I'm going to try.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Hi. This is good. So if I say something, I think it's funny, and it's not, I'm just going to do this. So last night at the screening, Carl's screening for his most recent film, Professor David Pallet introduced all three of the panelists. And I sat there and I tried to write it all down because I thought that'd be the easiest way. I would just stand up and say whatever David said. But I ran out of paper because I assumed that one pad was going to be enough. And I think that lasted longer than the movie did. That was a really long introduction. So I'm going to prove you can do it without lasting for 20 minutes. And I'm going to really show off because what I want to do is I'm going to do 3 versions because I wrote them all last night in my head. And I'm going to do them all in shorter time than it took David to do the one. So the first one, I want to introduce all 3 people in terms of what you're going to remember. So I can tell you, like, for example, your law firm and things like that, no one's going to remember that. So I'm going to just sum up and say, you're a writer and you have a book coming out and it's on teen films. And what's the name of the book?
It's going to be called You Couldn't Ignore Me If You Tried, Behind the Brat Pack Films That Changed a Generation. And it's about all the 80s youth films such as St. Elmo's Fire, and The Breakfast Club, and Pretty in Pink, and the history behind the making of them from the mouths of the actors and the filmmakers, and also exploring the impact they've had on the people who grew up on them and on filmmaking in general.
And this is Suzanne Agoura, because I almost did this without saying her name.
Details.
Carl Kurlander. What you're going to remember about him is that he wrote St. Elmo's Fire, that he has a new film that's very good that we saw yesterday called Tale of Two Cities, that he worked on Saved by the Bell, that he's a screenwriter and now director, producer. He lives a mixed life in Pittsburgh and in LA. And that he and I are going to probably fight a lot during the panel. And he's going to call me artsy. Rob Cohen is an attorney that works in the music industry that represents Pearl Jam. That's what you're going to remember. You represent other people, but that's what they're going to remember. All right, that's version 1. Version 2 is the personal approach, what I know based upon my experiences. And I want to start with Carl because I've known him the longest. We met on Thursday. And we met on Thursday night. We both flew in from LA on the red eye. Wednesday arrived, and we were going to meet for a drink at 9:30, and that was going to be a short thing. And I think we argued about film and art and business until at least after midnight. So don't meet him for a drink at 9:30. That's what I know about Carl personally. The next day, I met Susanna. So she's my second. And we had coffee. And what I learned about her is if you're going to meet her for coffee, don't expect to get any coffee, because we ended up sitting at a table. But what I learned was that her book is going to be really good and that she's very smart. And so you've got to show some of that today, because that's... Rob, I have to say you're an enigma to me because we shared him. So just think of him as the enigma, because I don't know. We wrote over together today, but that's it. Okay, those were the 2 versions. The third version is tying everybody together in terms of why we're here. What I know, there's 2 ways of doing this. One, I could say, okay, Carl wrote St. Elmo's Fire, you wrote about St. Elmo's Fire, and you were a character in St. Elmo's Fire. So, but I think the better way to do it is to say, these are all people that wanted to work in the entertainment industry, and they've been successful at it. And I suspect some of you have kids that say, I want to go into movies, or I want to do this, and you're thinking, why don't you go into pre-med, or why don't you do something else instead? And having done Duke in LA for 10 years, I have a lot of students that came out doing my program and who are now working in the industry, contributing greatly, and are making a very good living at it. And so I want people to think of it in those terms, and these guys are evidence of that. So that's what we're going to do today. Okay, so let's start. Can I just ask you all questions, and then we'll just see how we do this, because I have no idea. Oh, and let's clap for the panel for being here. Can I ask y'all, first of all, what you think the smartest thing you ever did to advance your careers, and what the dumbest thing was you ever did to not advance your careers? And it can be I went to law school, or it can be I told somebody that was a bad tie. I mean,
well, I can start with the dumbest. That's always the easiest. The dumbest thing I did to advance my career was to try to have a career. I never planned to go in the entertainment industry. It wasn't something that I went, oh, I'm going to be, as we discussed the other night, I'm not an artsy person. I was a bumblebee in a school play here with John Clum. And I can explain, that'll come up later. But that was my experience. I was pre-med, and I had a crush on a girl, and no girl could talk to me, so I became infatuated with a girl from the St. Elmo's Pallet. I was sure Korean male career. It's a long story, but that ended up, I had to write something about this girl, and that's its own long story. But the bottom line is, I did it from my passion. I did it, and I hate that word passion, by the way, because you're passionate. Passion is just the prerequisite. What you really need to do is have the same work ethic as you do as a doctor. You need to pay attention to detail like you were if you were an engineer building a building. No one's going to hand you $100 million to make a movie just to say, like, oh, isn't that artistic? I don't know anything about artistic. The only time I saw the word artistic was when they were giving me money on the contracts. It said artist. I really, who's that? Because, right, people are just yelling at me a lot and saying, okay, we better get this right. So, but the odd thing is when you try to have a career, and this is where I think Duke is so much better than, in some ways, than like a USC. USC people go to have a career. They want to be the next Spielberg. There's only one problem with that. There is a Steven Spielberg. And guess what? He wanted to tell stories about the suburban upbringing and aliens. And he really wanted to do that. And he really believed in that. And that's what he did. And that's why he's Steven Spielberg. And so you have to find whatever your voice is. So the big catch is, people who want to have careers, I think you should go into investment banking. There's a career path there, and it doesn't matter. You could be X, Y, or Z, and no one will ever know your name, and you'll have a lot more money than anyone else, and if that's what you want, go do that. But, so every time I've gotten in trouble, it's usually, well, I'm always in trouble, but, you get in trouble when you think, oh, this will be good for my career. That's, and you've seen those movies where people do it that are good for their careers. So that's my take.
I mean, me personally, after graduating law school, I went to work at a large corporate law firm in New York doing mergers and acquisitions work. And so the smartest thing I did to advance my career is to kind of lift my head, off my desk for long enough to say, this isn't really what I want to do. I really want to be in the entertainment business. And so I started contacting entertainment law firms and entertainment companies, and was able to talk myself into a job in a couple of months, and I've been working in the music industry ever since. And so kind of, I think the most important thing is to take that first step and say, I'm going to try to be in the entertainment industry, because a lot of people talk about it, but very few people ever actually do it. I'm constantly meeting people at my old firm going, gee, what you do sounds really interesting. And say, well, you can do it too if you just actually try. So that's the first step. And for me, kind of probably the dumbest thing I did may have been to go to law school in the first place, or at least to go to law school directly out of college and not having spent the time to try other things, to try being a writer first, or something else. Because again, I meet a lot of people, a lot of students who are thinking of going to law school, and they'll say things like, well, I think a law degree is really flexible, and you can do a lot of other things with it, to which I say, not really. A law degree is a really good degree to be a lawyer, but it's not such a good degree to be anything else. You can be lots of different kinds of lawyers, but after you spend 3 years in law school, and train yourself to be a lawyer, chances are you're going to be a lawyer, and it's going to be a lot harder to go work in the mailroom of CAA or start as a writer than it would have been directly out of college.
Yes, I made the same mistake. And
I guess I would say I was working as an editor for a few years at Premiere, the movie magazine, which was a great magazine that told, behind the scenes stories about the making of films and wasn't too gossipy or red carpety, but wasn't too serious about cinema. It was just right. And I was an associate editor there. I had certainly on the surface a great life. I had a huge section that was my own that I wrote and edited every month. I was their main face on television and their main voice on radio, and got to be on things like VH1's The Fabulous Life of the Brat Pack, and it was it was great. And I think a lot of people would have just stayed there, because why would you pass something like that up? But in my heart, so the point is, it was sort of the hardest thing I did and the smartest thing I did, I think, was leaving Premiere after a few years and telling myself I have to leave so that I can write this book I've always wanted to write about these movies that changed my life. And that I remember, the first time I had the idea for this book was when I was actually a junior at Duke. I had been watching St. Elmo's Fire for the 20th time with my girlfriends in the commons room of my dorm here at Duke, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but it's a great kind of coming-of-age movie set in the 80s. It filmed in the 80s, came out in 85, about a group of people graduating from Georgetown, but we know it's really Duke, and their struggles to figure out who they are in the world and what they want to do with their lives, and how does romance and friendship fit into all this, and how hard it can be in that sort of freshman year of life as we think of it. And I was so struck, even as a junior at Duke, in the commons room, by how rare it is to see a movie that took these kinds of struggles so seriously. And I remember thinking, there should be a book about these kinds of movies and the way they were made and how they affected people. And I remember looking, literally the next day, and discovering that book did not exist. And some little thing in my head thinking, I want to be the one to write that book one day. And what do I have to do today as a junior at Duke to kind of connect the dots so that when I'm a grown-up person, I could maybe do that. So, it was a long journey to make that happen, and obviously we'll talk more about that later, but the point is, I think the smartest thing I did that was hardest was to leave Premiere when things were certainly easy and nice and going great, to do something that mattered so much to me in my heart, that was a risk. And I guess the less smart thing I did was, I don't know, this is just something that just now is maybe occurring to me, was that I stayed at Premiere for a number of years. It was sort of the main magazine where I worked. I went from being a little baby assistant answering the phones to being an associate editor. And it was great to have been at this one place, but I think maybe I have friends who were editors or writers at maybe 3 or 4 magazines in the same period of time. And I think it's maybe easier once you're freelance if you've worked at a lot of places. So if I had it all to do again, maybe I would have worked at 2 or 3 magazines instead of just one. But who knows? Maybe it had to be the way it was for it all to have turned out how it did.
okay. My next question is, I have a secret agenda, because why I'm here is to promote Duke in LA. And I imagine some of you are parents who their kids might be thinking about doing Duke in LA. So I want to ask you guys about internships in terms of how important do you think, because this is their chance when they come to LA, they get to do internships at entertainment industries. And in y'all's experiences, how important are internships for when they get out of school?
I actually did intern, so I can't speak for that part of it. But when I hire young lawyers, I always am looking for kind of 3 things. I'm looking for someone who has good academic credentials, which everybody graduating from Duke will. Someone who has some experience at being a lawyer, but then kind of some real demonstrated desire to be in the entertainment industry, something more than a passing, this sounds fun. And for many people, that's that often shows up on the resume as they've been interning at record companies since they were freshmen in college. Other people, I've hired someone who Miss Saigon on Broadway. But the internships, kind of for me, really show that this is someone who's serious about being in this industry, and hopefully has learned something by being an intern, and hopefully that has identified what part of the industry they want to be in. So I know certainly the internship played a much different part in your life, but
Yeah, well, my whole life is the internship. I am the quintessential and it was a Duke weird internship. You know, I was pre-med, pre-law, pre-everything. I went through 7 majors. I was, you know, I said last night my 3 words as a freshman you had to write down was serious, funny, and confused, and you know, it hasn't never changed. But basically, I was, and actually some of this is documented in St. Elmo's Fire, I was accidentally living with a girl who was a Kappa on Central Campus, and a story too long, who ended up cheating on me and sleeping with an Israeli soccer player, and I tried to freeze myself to death right the day that the LSATs were coming, and so it was a rational response, I thought. And then basically, she was saying, we were fighting, the phone rang, and she picked it up and she said, you know that internship thing that you applied for, you just got it. I'm like, what? And I didn't really care because she had broken my heart. But anyway, what happened is, how the internship happened was, and this is its own book, so sorry, but a guy named Tom Mount, who protested here and who had a family in North Carolina, who's an amazing man, produced Bull Durham, among other things. But he had, at 35, was running Universal Studios. And Jake Phelps, another amazing man who was the head of the union here for years and a hippie kind of protest cool guy, Jake's like, hey man, how about you do something for Duke? So Tom went to Lou Wasserman, the head of the studio, and said, how about giving us a scholarship internship? And so he arranged, while he was head of the studio, to have this freak liberal arts Duke's MCA scholar internship to Universal Studios. I knew nothing about the film business. I mean, zero. In fact, and the internship, in the long story, was split between me and some other girl who wanted the money. They gave us way too much money for Duke back then, believe it or not. And then 10-week internship, of which I called the studio, the guy who was in charge of me as an intern, who had gone to law school, graduated Georgetown Law School, and then ended up washing Peter Gruber's car, which is the hardest thing because law school doesn't really help. Washing Peter Gruber's car helps. And that guy who's in charge of me, an intern, is now the chairman of Village Roadshow and ran Warner Brothers, Bruce Berman. Bruce Berman
Well, I interviewed for my book.
was in charge of me as an intern. And I said, is there a reading list and is there housing at the studio? To which he said, what are you talking about? Just come here, and hung up on me. The first day of the internship, Tom Mount, the head of the studio, said, just sit behind me and listen. And there were the greatest filmmakers in the world pitching him, Steve Martin and Bernardo Bertolucci, all these people pitching him wonderful ideas. And he'd go, great, great, I love it. And then the minute they leave, he'd go, I said, but you just said you loved it. He said, they're great ideas, but I can only say yes 12 times a year. And these are the most talented people in the world, and they're trying to pitch me their ideas. And then he gave me scripts to read every day. And he told me, you know, go out and find your own job. I'm like, what? He said, just use my name. I thought he wanted me to call myself Tom Mount or something. But I had to go and tell people.
Use my name.
I ended up getting an internship on going to, you know, I just worked at the studio for 10 weeks. And you learn, there were a lot of people from USC, and which I know you are affiliated with. You know, they know the business. It's like what they do every day. It's like growing up in Pittsburgh working in the steel business. You know, people know the business. The great thing is you don't have to be in LA as much as you used to, but you still have to be in LA. It's where 95% of the business is. And you need to demystify it, which is what most of my mission is, because I knew nothing and I try to give back. So the internship to me is everything. I mean, without the internship, I'd be a dermatologist in Pittsburgh right now. And happy. So, you know.
You might have gotten that girl.
Yeah, could have gotten the girl.
I would say that, yeah, I would think that the reason internships are so essential in the creative fields is, you know, because there really is no built-in infrastructure at all for a career path for doing something creative. And I remember my senior year at Duke, my friends who wanted to become investment bankers and go into consulting and things like that. It was, you know, you had to be smart and the best to get those jobs, but the way about applying for them was so laid out for them. You know, they just showed up at the Bryan Center and there was the booth and for Merrill Lynch and you dropped your resume into it, and if you were smart and impressive enough on paper, you came in for an interview, and it was this sort of easy built-in structure to even try for things like that. And, you know, guess what? Premier Magazine, you know, Random House, who's published by my book, they don't exactly have booths at the Bryan Center, you know, saying drop off your resume if you think you're a fun, talented writer. So that's why internships matter so much, because in this kind of field, you're lucky. A magazine like Premiere it's out of business now, maybe 1 or 2 editorial openings a year, entry-level editorial openings a year. And the way you knew who people, the way you knew people and who was smart and talented of young people was simply through internships. And the internships in my young life helped me in every way move to the next level. I mean, the summer between my freshman and sophomore year at Duke, I interned at CBS News in New York, which was interesting and impressive. I learned that ultimately I did not want to be Diane Sawyer when I grew up, but it was fascinating. And then actually the summer between my junior and senior year, which is the summer I reached out to Carl and met Carl through the Duke Alumni Network, because I was beyond excited that someone who had written Cinema's Fire, had gone to Duke and was basing it on Duke. But anyway, I was living in LA that summer with my parents who are here and my husband, yay. And anyway, working at a company called Brillstein Gray Entertainment, which did and does a number of interesting things, such as producing a little show they were getting ready for its first broadcast called The Sopranos. And I remember seeing a binder with The Sopranos written on it, handwritten, thinking this is about, a singing group or whatever. And why wouldn't you think that? And they managed celebrity actors, people like Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston and the cast of Saturday Night Live. It was a really great place to be. And I remember it was like learning a new language, trade publications like Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, they called directors Helmers, and cinematographers Lensers, and it was just a new world. I really felt like I was studying abroad, because I was immersed in this whole new universe, a whole new language, and I loved it. But it was the middle of my internship there, and I was doing very well, but I didn't really have one close mentor, one close person who I sort of felt that I could connect with, and I knew I needed that kind of thing, because it's better at an internship to have one person you're really close with who will believe in you and help you down the path than 5 you kind of get along a little with because they won't remember you a year later. So anyway, this one fateful night, I was leaving Brillstein Gray and getting in the elevator, and this guy comes running down the hall. He says, "Hold the door." And it was this 29-year-old man named Tony Carey, who was at the time this wonderkind in that he ran their entire TV production department and had been working there since he was a kid at USC, actually 10 years earlier. Held the door. So he knew who I was, I knew who he was, but we'd never really spoken. We get in the elevator, the door's shut, and the elevator goes down a couple feet and then just stops. And the elevator ended up being stuck for about 4.5 hours. And it was an elevator, this big. And this guy and I had never talked. And, by the end of it, we were like best friends. It was like being in a foxhole with someone. And we just, were sitting on the floor, we laughed, we cried, we bonded, and we discovered we both were obsessed with the same 80s movies, which you may discover is a theme in my life, and particularly St. Elmo's Fire, which was his very favorite. And in that moment, I was able to reveal to him my mind, my passion, my intellect about this subject, and mainly just my incredible devotion, to wanting to either make movies or write about movies and learn everything I could about it and the entertainment industry in general. So my life really changed after finally they, wielded pried the doors open. It was not fun. It was kind of scary, actually, but that was part of what made us bond, because we were frightened. But anyway, my life changed because the next day he basically treated me as his little apprentice, and I was able to go do things that other interns were definitely not able to do. I sat in on meetings I definitely should not have been sitting in on, and I basically was like him. Everywhere he went, I went, and that changed my life. And to this day, that's a person who, when I apply for jobs, gives, not that I've done that in a while, but back in the days when I was young and interviewing for jobs, he would, be the person that recommended me. I interviewed him for this book I just wrote, and it just kind of has been building upon itself all those years. So the internships, and then when I was an editor at Premiere, I actually ran the internship program at Premiere. So it was my job to pick the young, kids who would be those interns. And almost always when we did hire a young junior editor type, it was someone who had been our star intern, that summer. Absolutely. And that's just who it was, and because we knew their work, we trusted them, and so the bottom line is, since there is no path like there is to becoming like a banker or something, you have to use the internships to create your own path.
Okay. I sort of have a question for y'all, which is for you. How many of you have kids that you actually are worried that they're artsy? Like, okay. And
I'm not worried, she is artsy.
and that's okay if you're not worried about it. You guys have, and I know, Carl, that you want to wash that artsiness out of them to some degree, but they shouldn't be worried, because you can be artsy and you can want to have a career in the entertainment industry, and it's an okay thing. It's a good thing, and you can survive. You don't have to talk them out of it and have them go to law school instead.
I wish they started calling bankers artsy. I think that the creative financing that's ruined this country is artsy. And I think that from now on, that people should go on into the arts and call that the arts and take it. I personally get up every morning and work from morning till night. I do the best I can at solving problems which are hard, which are interesting, which if I was a chemist, I would be doing the same type of work. I don't understand the word artsy. I think it's great if you're artsy. My daughter likes to paint. She likes to draw pictures. She's 9. I think everyone goes, oh, she's so creative. I'm like, well, that won't get her anywhere. Working, discipline, that gets you someplace. And, you know, I don't know if I'm talented. To this day, I don't know, and I probably will never know if I'm talented. I do the best I can. The hardest thing is the risk. You know, it forced me, because of my circumstances here, to take this. The biggest risk I ever took, ironically, was going to LA, and I told the story last night. My old grandmother called and said, well, first of all, a week before I got the internship, if you don't mind me going back a second, my father called and said, you know, you have no direction, you don't know what you're doing in your life, you're crazy. I got the internship. Oh, I always knew you were going to do this. Then I was out in LA. I was living in a laundry room in an anarchist collective in the Armenian mass murder district. He's like, you're crazy, you're doing nothing, you're not making any money, how are you going to survive? Then, of course, St. Elmo's fire happened. Oh, I always knew you were going to do this, you know. And, you know, it is so easy in the rearview mirror to look at this. But the bottom line is, what my internship provided and what the business is, they call it the business. I don't see anyone in LA ever call it the artsy. Nobody goes, hey, let's do the artsy. I'm in Pittsburgh now, a dying city, which supports the arts. I'm like, give me some of that arts and we'll make some business here. Because the money they put in the arts and the symphony, which is, you know, doesn't give money back, the entertainment industry is $30 billion a year. It does more than the steel business, and it does more than the auto business. So I don't really understand the conversation about artsy. I've been in the business for 20 years. That's where I lost my hair and got fat, because people put me in a room and said, make business. They didn't say, go make art. And by the way, sometimes the business turns into art, and that is great. But as far as I'm concerned, it's 95% work ethic, persistence, anything that any other business is. And, you know, you do have to have, I guess, some sense of something to say. That's the big difference, is I do think you have to have a point of view if you're going to be on the creative side of this, as they call it. But to get you through, it's not the creativity, that's kind of God-given or whatever it is. It's the applying that. And one last thing that Tom Mount told me when I was an intern, which I never forgot, he pointed to a lot of other executives around and everyone else, and he said, well, one particularly said, he'll be great depending on how much he can overcome his neuroses. And so a lot of it is, how much can you get through, given all the baggage you got? How much can you take of a really tough industry? You know, how tough are you? So that's my take on arts. Sorry.
I also just think, you know, we think of artists as being kind of tortured and, you know, sitting in their house and crying or going, oh, you know, but the reality is in the entertainment industry, obviously you're an artist, it's some part of your soul is artistic, obviously, but you really have to be incredibly organized and on top of things and waking up every morning saying, who can I call today, who can I, you know, email to try to advance my dream, whether it be a screenplay you wrote or a book about the industry or whatever. I mean, I guess my point is, yes, we're artists, but we also have to be incredibly shrewd business people, you know, and you're running your own little business that requires constant just energy and devotion, attention to detail, a little obsessive-compulsive disorder never hurts, and that's what I'm trying to say. It's not what you think of as, you know, the typical artist kind of drinking absinthe or whatever, you know, listening to, you know, folk music. I mean, it's maybe your heart is thinking those artistic things and feeling those artistic things, but your real world has to be incredibly businesslike and organized every day to make it happen, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of you know, the question is kind of is pursuing a career in the entertainment industry a risky thing to do? You know, I think, you know, it's, as Carl says, it's a business. It's as successful a business as we have in this country right now. The people who kind of graduated a couple of years ago and went to work at Shearson and on Wall Street probably looked like a really good thing a few years ago. Now that's looking really very risky. So, you know, the thing that certainly Carl and Susanna show is like you pursue what you're passionate about, and if you pursue what you're passionate about, and you pursue it vigorously because you are passionate about it, you will be successful at it. And while I'm the one who did go to law school, so I'm not artsy. I certainly I do represent artists, and I do refer to them as artists.
But the oddest thing is, by the way, he paints. He's a wonderful artist. He's a much better writer than me. He's a lot funnier. There's a lot of good. He has all the qualities that it would take. But the difference is I was pushed out into the limb, and I think the recent movie I did, My Tale of Two Cities. I had to do independently. I had to go raise $500,000. Now I used to get paid $500,000 just to do my job, but I had to go raise that to do this money. I had to deal with lawyers. I had to deal with hard businessmen who were skeptical of the industry. And now I've got this movie that some people seem to like, but how do I get it out there? I mean, these are all problem-solving decisions, and the people who help me are not artists, they're the businessmen, including Paul O'Neill and Teresa Heinz-Carey and people who we talked to about the movie. But the great irony is that Pittsburgh is so endemic of so many cities in that 100 years ago, the Industrial Revolution, they funded the arts, and they thought, well, the manufacturing, we don't need to deal with the fact that we invented the movie industry. But now there's no manufacturing, and now you get, people better figure this out very quickly. And particularly what's so great about the resources here at Duke, which I hope we'll talk about, there's all these great resources here, but it's got to be higher on the university's priority to say, look, this is not, Henry Hillman, who's a multi-billionaire in Pittsburgh, donated a huge theater to my campus called the Hillman Performing Arts Center. I said, put video in there and that'll be the Hillman Job Center. It's where the jobs are. So I hope people start perceiving it that way, but there's a lot of work to be done to help programs like Duke in LA, the Career Center, and generally, I cannot believe coming back here 20 years later that it is not more organized. I mean, I thought that's what we did with Duke in Hollywood. When I first went out there, they said, oh, you're the only one in the entertainment industry. And then I was having lunch at the NBC commissary, and this beautiful girl comes up to me who I recognized as a Tridelt who painted stripes on me when I was a bumblebee. It was Linda Mancuso. And she said, hi, we connected. We ended up working together for 8 years. And Linda was one of the most popular people. She told me about 12 other people. Then Fred Goldring, who's an entertainment attorney, he and I had lunch, and he suggested, let's create an organization. We created Duke in Hollywood. Spontaneously, literally, we would have parties, 50, 100 people. People love helping young people because in Hollywood, the young people are going to run your, I'm trying to get jobs from some of those Duke students I met yesterday. They're incredible. I mean, and I'm quite serious. I was 24 when I did St. Elmo's Fire. So age is not a problem there. But it's got to be kind of woven together more. Not only here, but particularly here, it would be helpful to make it really work for Duke. And I think the students and the parents have a good obligation of help and actually could really benefit from helping form this organization better. Sorry.
Okay, feeling all the pressure of being the moderator here, I don't want to miss something. So my next question is, what story or point to the audience or something would you like to do that you're hoping I ask something that you can actually fit it in? So, because I don't want to miss it. So what?
No, I can go on forever. So why don't we take questions from the audience and then we'll do that?
We will do.
Okay,
we are going to do that.
Well, I guess I thought I was saying my piece about that. I mean, I can go
If
on
you
forever.
have, it's okay.
No,
Okay.
You go. No.
I have one if you don't.
Yeah, you go
I have
ahead.
one.
Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about all this obviously on the way down here, and I guess what I would say is, I feel very blessed right now. I'm 31, and I do feel really blessed in my career right now that I got to write this book that I dreamed of writing, and that it's being published by a wonderful publisher and coming out June 23rd, mark your calendar. And so anyway, but the point, and I do really feel lucky now, but it was a long, hard journey, and from now back to when, I graduated from Duke in May of '99, a lot of things happened, obviously, that allowed me to get to where I am today, and I just sort of wanted to tell a little anecdote that demonstrates how hard it can be when you first graduate to try to find that first job, as we talk about in St. Elmo's Fire. But, I graduated from Duke. I had been, I sort of got a big head at Duke just because I was kind of one of the real talented people in the English department, and I had, all these awards for poetry, and I really felt like, wow, I'm a poet, I'm an artiste, and I have all these things to contribute to the world. That's how people should feel when they graduate from a wonderful school like Duke. And then I came home, and I just sort of flopped out on my, bed at home in Manhattan that I'd grown up in, and I went, oh, now what? How now am I possibly going to turn all these dreams and visions and ideas I've had into some real career? And I tried different things, and I always knew I wanted to try to write about movies, and my dream really at that point had been to try to work at Premiere magazine so that one day I could maybe try to write this book. But in the meantime, I got a job. My first real job was on an ABC sitcom, which is, you should be open to anything when you're young like that. Just do anything. I just didn't think I wanted to go into television, but hey, it was cool, and from the makers of Frasier, so I said, let's go for it. So anyway, I had this job at this ABC sitcom. And suffice it to say, it was not quite, sitting under a tree writing poetry. This was a job in which I had three main responsibilities. And I had this kind of mean boss. I had this really mean woman boss. It was like, "Arr!" And then she had a little henchman who was like slightly less mean, who kind of slightly hated me. She was like, "Meh." And so basically, the mean boss woman just hated me, and she did everything she could. I think she hated that I was just from Duke and, full of life and passion and vigor, and she hated that. And so basically, I had three responsibilities that I had to do every day, which then sprinkled other miserable tasks throughout each day that I had to do. But my main three responsibilities were keeping the office supplies perfectly stocked, which would be fine except for the fact that this mean boss had to have, 10 of the pink Post-its and 8 of the number 8 Bics, and God forbid it was the number 7 Bic, And so often did I have to call this office supply company that literally, a year ago, I called this office supply company for the first time since 2000 or whenever I had that job. I had to order a transcribing machine, and I call, and the company picks up. I'm like, hi, I need blah, blah, blah. And the guy goes, Suzanne Agoura? Because that's literally what it was. So, okay, that's not too bad, but, it's not exactly writing essays about Chaucer either. Okay, then my second thing I had to do at this job, I was a production assistant, by the way. The second thing I had to do was there were these water coolers that had to be constantly replenished throughout the 3-story building in Queens where this sitcom was being filmed. Now, I would not have picked moi to be the person to lift these, 50-pound water cooler bottles and replace them all day long because there were like, burly key grips around. But this boss was like, that's a perfect job for you, Suzanne Agoura. Let's have you change these 40-pound, water cooler jugs all day long. The next thing I had to do. And again, I never complained because I thought if I complained, they would just hate me more. But I think they thought of me like Odie, the dog in Garfield, who's just so enthusiastic. And the more I was enthusiastic, the more they hated me and made it worse. But anyway, and the third thing I had to do was one of the producers had these 3 matching baby pug puppies. Now, I love dogs more than anything, as my family can attest. And I have nothing wrong, no problem with, being in charge of dogs. So I had to walk these dogs, so she brought them to work every day. I had to walk them frequently. But the problem was they really liked to poo, and they liked to poo throughout the entire building, and I was responsible for cleaning up the poo and making constantly sure that there was none of it, in the building. And this 3-story building with, 20 different offices, very wide-reaching. And there were days where literally for hours I would just run around like a mad woman, room to room, picking up poo, just never ended. And basically there was this one day where a huge exec from ABC was coming from LA to stay, and do some work there, and he had this big office, and my mean boss said, if there was ever a day when there can't be dog poo on the floor, it's today, in this office. And you can imagine, of course, I all night long, I had nightmares about it and what would happen. I went to work the next day terrified, and I did such a good job, and it was perfect. And then, of course, I was called away to something else. Right in the moment the exec walked into his office, and a big steaming poo was just recently deposited there for him. And she goes, Gora! I love that my last name is associated with seeing dog poo on the floor. It's the first thing you think of. And I just remember thinking, I've heard of a lot of, crappy jobs over the years, but this is ridiculous. Anyway, so the point is, it worked out okay, but I was really miserable at then, and I would do my best to put on a smile all day, but I would come home at night and just cry, because I would think, 6 months ago I was at my beloved Duke writing poems and, being with my friends and getting awards for being smart and fabulous, and now I'm picking up dog poop and ordering Post-its like my life depended on it. But the good news is, if there is any, that happens to everyone, I think, in those first couple years, right?
Yeah.
Like right after
I
college.
have to say, that is going to be my metaphor, because if you're not willing to pick up the poo,
Yeah.
you're in the wrong business.
Exactly.
There is poo to be picked up for your entire career. There are people living in giant houses who pick up poo. And So I think there couldn't be a better story. And I think if you heard that story and you said, you know, I think I need to not pick up poo, then I think you should very much go over to the, you know, accounting firm and see exactly how it works.
You're gonna have to pick up poo there too.
Yeah.
I'm in a law firm. It wasn't exactly stinking poo.
Exactly.
But,
Well, life is full of that, as they say. But, well, that was such a great story. But I did want to touch a little bit in thinking about the hardest thing, I think, is risk. You know, it's horrible. And I think the hardest thing about people at Duke, and what I love about Susanna is because she looks like she's the perfect person, but thank God she's got this great humor and all this. People who don't have a sense of humor and who haven't been through some hard times don't last in the entertainment business, in my experience, very long. I mean, there is so much rejection. You know, I had a friend who was writing a script for Tom Cruise, and then one week, the script that was supposed to go to him went to Mel Gibson, and he's like, oh my God, I'm not the #1 star in the world. I mean, you know, no matter who you are, you're always unemployed after your next project. You're constantly dealing with humiliation, and it's just the nature of that business. I mean, it's the nature of so much now that this is kind of an even Steven time we are in their culture. But, you know, it was funny because the biggest risk I ever took, and one My Tale of Two Cities turned out, you know, when I moved back to Pittsburgh by accident to teach, I thought, oh, well, this will be fun. It'll be like the safe thing. And, of course, I ended up on Oprah Winfrey for moving to Pittsburgh, of all things. Now, I could have stayed in L.A. for everyone in L.A. go, oh, how do we get on Oprah? Oh, just move to Pittsburgh. That's what, you know. It's like Oprah was fascinated by the fact that I had left Hollywood to go have a normal life. And she had me on the show, and I said how happy I was living in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, which is literally Fred Rogers was someone who took a huge risk and left NBC and went back to Pittsburgh to make programming that would make good attractive for children. And the irony is right after Oprah, Fred Rogers died and the city of Pittsburgh went bankrupt. So using all these skills I've learned in Hollywood, I, you know, networked through the town, and we tried to bring all of Hollywood back, and we're still trying to make programming in Fred's old studio, which is state of the art. But my point being is ultimately you had to learn to reinvent yourself once again. And so much of life is about that. And to make Jim's program a requirement, you need to know LA. Whether you live elsewhere, I encourage every student, I don't see how you can go through Duke and not do the Duke in LA program if you're planning to go to the entertainment business. You may not choose to do there. You may choose to do something else. I have students, and I've placed over 40 students since I fly back and forth. I have well over 40 students working out in Hollywood. But I have some students who went out to Hollywood, got the taste of it for a year, and said, you know, I'm going to work in the local PBS station, or I'm going to go work in something else. You know, I love the way Susanna thinks you've got to be able to fail, and you've got to see the belly of the beast. And right now, I don't think, by the way, I think if somebody decided their mission was, and it might be all of us, to turn Duke into an entertainment capital, it would take about 10 minutes of really hard. You know, you have a student television station that's great, a documentary film program that's great, a Duke in LA program, really smart people, alumni who'd be willing to help. But someone's got to make it their mission. And, you know, and then all of us would be willing to play our parts, I think. So that's my thing.
I work at a small music law firm. We represent mostly artists like, you know, Dave Matthews Band, Jay-Z, you mentioned Pearl Jam. We represent a lot of new artists, the Strokes, the Killers. About 5 years ago, I had a meeting with a new client. It was I was referred by a friend of a friend, and went into a conference room, and it was a family, a mother and father and 3 kids. The father was a pastor at a small evangelical church in New Jersey. He said, you know, my 11-year-old son has written a song about kind of the anniversary of 9/11, and it's really hopeful, and the 5th anniversary of 9/11 is coming up. It'd be, you know, we think this would be great, and let's try to get a record deal. Okay, let's give it a try. You know, I had 3 kids, I didn't know. And so we were able to get them a record deal on Columbia, and they made an album that wasn't quite the right album. The single didn't take, and so they made a second album for Columbia without the first one ever being released, and that album was just about to come out, and they were working on it for now. It's 2 or 3 years have gone by, And the day the record was going to be released, the president of Columbia Records got fired, and so the record came out and nothing happened. We're then able to take that artist and get them on Walt Disney Records. That artist is the Jonas Brothers, and they now account for like 75% of my business. They're just the biggest thing in pop music right now, and they're into music and movies, and they're clean-cut kids, so every sponsor in the world wants them, and they're also the hardest working client that I've ever had. They're just nonstop, and they love what they do. So again, whether it's kind of these kids who have been plugging away, and whether my involvement with them, which was, it's been 5 years working for them, and it's paid off in a big way. You never know who's going to be the next big thing. Or Carl tells his story about taking Joel Schumacher's order for gazpacho and what that led to, and Suzanne with her stories. It's all. You've got to put yourself out there, and you've got to take advantage of the opportunities when they show you. And what you're doing at Duke is preparing yourself to be able to take advantage of those opportunities when they come available. The next step, if you want to work in the entertainment industry, is putting yourself and going after those things, whether it's picking up dog poo or whatever. So the opportunities will present themselves, and if you're there to take advantage of them, you could have a great career in the entertainment.
Let's open it up to the audience and ask and take some questions. Yeah. Okay.
One is, and how long did you stay at that first job?
Well, God, it felt like 25 years, but I think it was more like 6 months, 5 or 6 months or something like that. I was smart enough I had met the editor-in-chief of Premier Magazine earlier in an informational interview, which is a very important thing to try to get if you can, where you just sit with someone for 15 minutes, even if you're not trying for a specific job, and they get to know you, you get to know them. I had met him actually when I was a senior at Duke, and I had kept sending him letters every month, just a little note, how are you? Here's my latest film review in the Chronicle, and I'd literally done that every month, and so that by the time I was working at this awful sitcom, and I really knew that I had to get out of there and wanted to work at not just a magazine but Premiere, I just kept sending letters, hey, I'm working at this ABC sitcom picking up dog poop. I didn't say that part, but, and so when an opening opened to be his assistant, he thought of me, and so I was able to leave that sitcom. It wasn't that long. I go straight to Premiere, and it was sweet because later my former boss, the editor-in-chief, used to give talks on how to get your first job at a college. Now, I assumed all those letters I'd sent had gone straight in the trash, but he'd kept them all. He'd kept them all in a folder, and he would bring them to these talks about, he would say, you want to know how you get your first job out of college? And he'd lug out this, 4-inch thick manila folder and say, these are all from one girl. And it's proved to him not only how crazy I was, but how passionate, and also, you have to kind of have your stuff together, really, to be on the ball that much to send someone a letter every month, and he figured this girl could definitely handle being my assistant if she could handle remembering to write me a letter every month. So that's the answer to how long I was there. Not that long, though it felt like a long time.
And the other question is there an internship program in place now, or you're still trying to develop here at Duke in the industry?
Well, the way that you should just how the internships work with.
Yeah, there's definitely. For the Duke in LA program, one of the course requirements is an internship, and I've been in charge of the program for 10 years, and they get great internships, and Duke is really well respected there for those reasons, and we place them in great positions. Yeah.
But for those who aren't, what we're trying to do, and this is a good place, is Sherry Sturley. Is Sturley here? There's Sturley. What we're trying to, if we're successful, this could literally happen in resurrecting Duke in Hollywood, which was the original network. A lot of it is circumstance, where people are in positions in production and various things. Everybody moves around quickly. But if we're able to get up a Facebook account, say, with everybody's network, you can so easily, it's a question of, okay, who are the basic Duke people? I've done this in Pittsburgh. What we did is we created a website called Pitt in Hollywood. I'm not the original, Pitt in Hollywood. And what the students did is they wrote letters to people who they loved in the entertainment industry who were connected to Pittsburgh. And you never ask for a job because there were 1,000 resumes. You say, I'd like to hear your story. I'm thinking of wanting to be, is that your kindred over next to you? Yes. What do you want to be? Screenwriter. So you say, who's the screenwriter from Duke? I wonder if I know one. By the way, screenwriters are the worst people to meet. Why? They don't ever hire screenwriters. Producers hire screenwriters. You go to a producer, I'd like to be a reader for you, Tom Mount. Oh, Duke, Carl Kurlander, he was my first intern. Okay, you know, Surly, you know, you figure out who are the people who are producers who will talk to a screenwriter and say, I want to know what a producer does, and write it up for the Duke in Hollywood website. And in that way, you get, you know, it's not a linear like, oh yes, we have an opening, because every time there's an opening, there's 50,000. She's so right about persistence. You know, they don't know when they need the intern, except the, you know, oh, the summer, and if you can get out here, and we'll find. But as soon as we get that network up and running, I think this will be super easy. I mean, it was up and running, but that'll really help.
I think also we've made great progress, Sterling and I have, in the last year or two in terms of involving alumni in the Duke and LA program, and in terms of internships, but in terms of guest speakers and the conference we do at the end of each semester. We're really getting it integrated a lot more, and I think it's paying off, it's starting to pay off now, and I think even today is another step in that direction. Sterling, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, it is something that we care deeply about. We do have an alumni network that's already set up, but what we're trying to do is think about how to develop it even more for arts, media, and entertainment. And so stay tuned. Cameo from the Career Center, and I will be working with that to try and help. Because it's great to have internships for Duke and LA, but we have students all over the country that want to have internships as well. So
I can hire someone in Pittsburgh right now, but you got to move to Pittsburgh.
you know, nobody from Pittsburgh has asked yet, but it's a great city. Nothing wrong with Pittsburgh.
Well, I think there's a component of it too that's been a general theme throughout the conversation, that, you know, having the relationships are a very important part, but also added to that is the tenacity for an individual to go after those too. And so internship program is one way to label it, but also, you know, thinking of it as a relationship network that then each individual person has to put in their effort to be that tenacious person who gets noticed, does the small things right, and perseveres through that. I think, you know, and correct me if
No, I love that. And also there is a collective good here, which I really wanted to address, which is there's a pass it on quality. You know, I was grateful because I got this internship through Tom being grateful, who I've never been able to say full thank you to Tom Mount, who changed my life, or David Pallet, these people who helped me. The people who are coming up, I'll give you a good example. Randall Wallace, you know, and again, the problem usually with colleges, and I'm not pointing fingers at Duke because it happens all over, is people never follow the people in the entertainment business until they already have a hit movie. When they're starving, nobody wants to say, hey, how you doing? Well, the good thing about this type of network is you know the people and you nurture the young people, because in 5 years they are that person. Randall Wallace starved for a long time, then he did Braveheart. He hired Danny Lemon and Steve Zapatilowski, lost impossible last name to pronounce, both from Duke.
Steve Zapp.
Steve Z, yes. Yeah. And they are working with Steve and producing his next, I mean, Steve and Danny got married, by the way, apparently, and are working with Randall. And they used to have big parties in LA, which I think in this new tone they probably will. Dan Levinson, a lot of other people are going to, you know, and so you'll see the people you want to contact.
And I think the Duke, you know, family, if you want to call it, of people who work in entertainment is such an important resource. I mean, I think it's clear from these discussions you do need to have some sort of connections. But guess what? You know, it's not like you have to have some powerful family or family friends for these to be connections. Just being a member of the Duke community, that's your connection, right? And I remember, you know, that day at the end of my junior year when I was getting ready to go to LA for the summer, I walked into the Career Center for the first time in my life. I'd never felt any need to walk in there before then, but I thought, I'm going to be LA for this summer. I wonder if they have anything about people who are in LA, who went to Duke, who are interested in helping. And I flipped through this book. I remember spending a whole afternoon just looking through all these interesting alumni who, you know, organized by what they did. And I saw, oh my God, the guy who wrote Set I Was Fire went to Duke. And I wrote down your phone number. And it was as simple as that. When I came out there, I called him. He and his wife, Natalie, were so warm and welcoming. And actually, I had brought a poster with me from St. Elmo's Fire for him to sign, and there's a line that we love, and we saw the film again last night, so we were reminded again, where one of the characters is sort of, you know, confessing something in the middle of the night, and he says, oh, but we won't remember any of this tomorrow, and the girl he confesses it to says, it is tomorrow. And yeah, it's like this great line, and so Carl wrote on my poster, that summer of '98 or whatever it was, dream big, be great, it is tomorrow. And, because he knew even then I wanted to write about film. And anyway, so I framed that poster. It hung in my senior year at Duke dorm room. It continues to hang in my husband and my apartment living room over the couch. And, to have come full circle and now have written this book and interviewed all these actors who I loved who changed my life and filmmakers, and to be here at Duke talking about it with Carl, it sounds cheesy, but now it really is tomorrow, and I did dream big, and so it was about keeping dreams in an industry that often kind of wants to break your heart, and keeping the optimism and that thing in your heart that kept you believing in this when you were younger, just never letting that die, and not being afraid to reach out to the network of people who want to help you make your dreams a reality,
It is tomorrow. That is so artsy. That's
I was wearing a beret when I wrote that. Yeah. I lived above Sunset Strip for many years when she was visiting me. And 2 houses down from me was a woman named Gail Levin, who was the head of Paramount Casting. And she never came home. She had a small dog, no life, because she had to stay at the studio till 10 o'clock at night, every night, trying to fit. Casting directors are looking to solve a problem. The problem is actors do not treat it like a business. They treat it like an art scene. Unfortunately, and the people were accused in St. Elmo's Fire, we saw thousands of actors. And the big accusation, which became known as the Brat Pack, was you could tell when each of these people that we ended up casting came in, that they were treating themselves that they were going to deliver what they knew they were going to deliver. The worst thing an actor could say is, I'm going to be the next Meryl Streep. Well, good, because first of all, Meryl Streep can play anything and you probably can't, and second of all, there is a Meryl Streep. So if we need Meryl Streep, we'll get Meryl Streep. We need to know what you can do. I accidentally was sent out in commercials, and by my agent, just because I was at William Morris, and they realized I could play anything, any guy who got shat upon. If a guy needed to, he got handcuffed to a bed and someone sold his Bud Light, you're the guy to do it. You got to know who you are, and people need to know, as actors, what problem. First of all, they got to have great craft. There are only 5 real hot acting classes in LA. You get in those acting classes, and you'll be around a lot of working actors. They will have agents who will see you when you're in a showcase with them. So you go into, Larry Moss or Milton Consel's acting, and you will meet these people. You have to pay some dues. It's extremely hard to get into the classes. Eventually, you get showcased. You get on lists. You have generals with casting directors, and they will find. And if you have what it has to take, systematically, you can do this, and you better do it when you're young. It's very hard to do when you're, and that's true with everything. Do it when you're young and don't have responsibility. But people don't do it that way. They come out and they sit in cafes and and occasionally go on auditions and think that's a business. It's, so.
yeah.
I have sort of a question and a comment. Part of this has to do, I think, it sounds like a little bit with luck, as well as persistence. I have a niece who, on a lark, did an open audition, and she's now on the tour with Spring Awakening, which when it comes to LA, you've got to see it. It's awesome. And so she deferred college to take advantage of this incredible opportunity for this year. And, it's just fun to see that emerge. On the other hand, you're talking a lot about internships and so forth. And I'm here actually because my son's at Duke, but it's my other son who's at the University of Denver who is the passionate musician, very good, as a guitar player, interested in jazz, a lot of different things. But I don't hear internships that would help promote someone who wants, you're talking about being in front of the camera as an actress, but what about a musician? What do they do to begin to advance their passion and career as opposed to these things that, that's just different.
Right, no, that is a very different thing, and it's a hard time for musicians. It's a hard time, but it's an exciting time because the music industry is going through a whole paradigm shift, and the record companies are struggling. But with that, we hope too that there's opportunity for musicians to be discovered in new ways and to put their music out in new ways and to make a living in new ways. And again, the musicians who again, part of it is just you've got to put yourself out there and play at every gig you can play. Get yourself in a van and start driving around the country and build a fan base. I'm sure MySpace pages.
Just outline.
all those things, and you hope that if you're talented enough and you work hard enough, it's going to pay off. But it's a huge craft. That's a huge crapshoot. The amount of artists who become successful now is, usually successful is minor. There's a lot of people making a living at it, but it's hard. It's much harder than it was 10 years ago.
And then you got the father who is the attorney,
Well, if I can bring up, We Had to Score My Tale Two Cities, the movie that I finished. In Pittsburgh, there was a guy who was in the band Rusted Root, which was a huge band in the 90s, and he had a kid. So he knew, he was a smart kid, he'd gone to college, and he's got a degree in ethnomusicology. I needed someone to score the movie. He was incredible at doing that. I don't know if the music's really good, and he instantly picked this up. And scoring, I met some kids yesterday from Sweet and Sour Productions. They're not here, are they? They're incredible, these kids, and they made some of these commercials they did for Obama. I'm like, who's doing your music? Oh yeah, that's someone over here. When you're in college, I suggest that they learn to score movies, because there's so much of this, and this is where this guy Jim DeSpirito did this Post-Secret video with a band that we've got that we're going to put on our soundtrack. He got 1 million hits. Over 1 million hits. So, there are all these different opportunities, and the good thing is they don't have to be beholden. You shouldn't think of it in the narrow way of I've got to go and tour and then I'll be Eric Clapton. It's not going to work that way. But it's getting your song, and you can get songs in movies and TV shows a little easier, I'd imagine, than you used to, because I know this local band already has a song on a TV show. I'm like, how'd you do that? So, if you're good.
Yes, in the back.
Back to another internship question. I've tended to think of internships as being something the students usually do through junior and senior year. Probably an outdated way of thinking, but would you suggest that students, if they're really interested in something, start looking earlier than that?
Yes, actually, I would. For my students, because it's not a summer internship, it's a full semester internship. Duke and LA operates in the spring. So when they come as sophomores or as juniors, that's when they do their internship. And what's nice is a lot of them end up staying for the summer and either extending their internship through the summer or doing a different internship during the summer as well. I used to have the students encourage them to do it their junior year for maturity reasons and such, but I think actually I'm changing my mindset on that, and I like sophomores doing it, because one of the things about Duke and LA, at least, is if they kind of want to do movies, but they also, their moms talk them into doing pre-med as their major, if they don't really know which direction, when they come out, by the time they leave my program, they know whether they really, really need to do this, or whether maybe it's just something that was a phase or it's fun, but they're going to come back to Duke and then move forward with their actual major and career. So I think sophomores are great, and I encourage them to do it at that stage.
Can I jump in on this one too? Because working in a career center, internship to me is kind of like creative to Carl, I think. I think a lot, there are themes across what people have talked about, and that's, do what it is that you love and you want to learn more about, to see if it really is something that you really do love and you want to continue doing. Meet people who are doing what you potentially want to do and figure out ways to maintain those relationships. And immerse yourself in the things that you may potentially see yourself doing in the future to figure that out. Internships are one way to do that, but there are a lot of things that aren't called internship where you can be doing that, like informational interviewing, like volunteering, like participating in leading student groups on campus, like the Duke and LA program inside and out of the internship. So I think by thinking about, I need to get an internship, it's a good focus, but it's part of the focus that needs to be really big. And then the theme is, how the heck do you figure out, what you might want to do and how you do that? And then who are the people who can help you and be your allies in doing that? And be creative, be tenacious, be persistent in finding that in all realms, coursework and everything.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that a lot of people, a lot of students come in with the mindset for doing my program that the internship is pretty much the end all of it. That's why they're doing it. And what they find out is it's a component, but it's the other networking and the mentoring that I do and who they hear in their USC classes and some of those professors, their involvement, and it's such a much more rich experience than just the internship. And the other thing is, I said that they come out and they know whether they want to do they want to go in that direction. It's not just about whether they become a doctor or whether they become a director. It's also about what kind of director or what kind of entertainment they want to do. A lot of them come out and they say, LA is too big for me. I don't want to do LA. I'm going to work in Atlanta and make music videos, or I'm going to do something. But I just really found out that Los Angeles and that aspect isn't where I want to be. And it's so much better for them to find that out as part of my program than for them to pack up after they graduate, go to LA and use a year of their lives and then find that out. That's another good, yes?
Thank you for the information. As a parent who really doesn't have any idea what you are talking about, and I'm just a scientist, I don't know how to do it. What is the ratio of success and failure?
I'd like to take this question since my father and stepfather are both doctors. It's very interesting because I get that all the time, and I go, I'm doing some movie on Jonas Salk conquering polio. So I'll ask you, as a scientist, what is the ratio of all the millions of dollars that gets put into research of conquering diseases, of the number of diseases that actually get conquered? I think you find you have to spread out the money a lot and try a lot of scientists, experiments that fail. How much you get paid as that goes along is how good of a con man you are with the NIH. So I used to be very, there is 65,000 screenplays registered every year at the Writers Guild. There are 1,100 working screenwriters at any time. When we went on strike last year, there were 13,000 writers who show up, who have written a TV show or movie in a lifetime. That's the number of people who are in the Writers Guild of America. That said, as anyone who's interned and read scripts, most of them are crappy. Most of them aren't really good. And so you can throw out 90% of those. If you went to Duke and you're a good writer, and also having the persistence and treating it like you're going to medical school where it's going to be tough, then you have a lot better chance. I have yet to meet the successful, I have 40 students I now, and by the way, the faculty advisor, Duke didn't do this, but students came to me and formed Pitt in Hollywood. So I'm now faculty advisor of Pitt in Hollywood. The bottom line is, everybody I know who's talented, these kids, I haven't seen one kid fail where I went, oh, I thought he was going to, I can tell you right now, Suzanne, I'll buy stock in her, whatever she's going to do. I mean, if you approach it smartly, that you've got more of a chance. It is a horrible, beaten up business where, you don't get treated like a doctor every day. But, that's why.
You don't know how doctors are treated these days.
Yeah, these days, by the way, that's exactly what my father says now. And do not do what my father did, which is he would read People magazine. I'm learning about your industry. This Madonna seems big. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to read the New England Medical Journal and call you about that. So, yeah.
Each of you alluded to it, I think, but I'm not sure we heard specifically. Just for fun, what did you actually earn as an undergraduate degree at Duke?
I was an English major. I graduated with high distinction in English, and yeah, that was my degree.
Yeah, I was a poli-sci major.
And I went through 17 majors and just ended up as a history just because I was taking all the Marxist professors. And, but,
Other questions? Yes.
I have a son who's a drummer in New York, okay?
Good luck.
Didn't graduate from Duke. Is there any future for...
Drummer in New York, is he good?
He's doing the usual thing. He's graduated from college, not here. My daughter's here. And, he's working as a waiter, and he's getting tired of being a waiter, and he's in a band. And where do we go from here? Is he going to be... Are we going to fast forward and he's going to be 50 and a waiter in a band?
hopefully, if it's not working out, he'll stop before then. But you know, look, in terms of the front of the camera, the musicians, kind of from my experience, the ones that are successful, the ones who, no matter what you tell them, will do it anyway because they can't do anything else. You know, the great, musical artists. You know, remember hearing Bruce Springsteen interviewed when he was starting out. They asked, do you have any hobbies or anything you do besides music? He said, no. This is all I know. And the great musicians are the ones who, that's all they know. They have a story to tell, like Carl with the screenwriting. They have a story to tell. They have to get it out, and those are the ones who are going to be successful. So, if it's meant to be, you can't talk them out.
But the drummer, the guy, Jim DeSpirito, who's doing my stuff, I mean, the other alternative, which I think is great, is Jim is now, on top of being this incredible drummer, because Danny Elfman was a drummer who became a scorer. This guy, scoring and using your media, there's so much multimedia now. I think, unless you're just this passionate artist, which I guess are those people, the other thing is to really explore what the dimensions of what you can do with that talent. Drummers are good people to score movies, but you better start with student films and start when you're young, because you got to catch up with, and then they're practical problem solving with percussion and stuff. Yes.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Are you thinking of expanding your semester in LA through a summer in LA? I'm a parent of a senior, and she chose, they have one opportunity to be either on this campus and they love it and don't want to spend a semester away, or in her case, they also have an opportunity to live abroad. And so that's a real pull. And even though she wants a life after graduation out in LA, it would have been great if she could have gone for a summer somewhere along the way, and not given up the opportunity to go to Australia to live, and not giving up a semester, a spring semester here.
It's a good question, and the problem with it, because we've talked about it in the past, how could you do a summer program? The problem is the internship, they want you for at least 20 hours or so a week, and if I'm going to compress a class into a shorter period, I need that time for the class as well, and it's hard to fit everything into that compacted schedule. So I'm not sure how we do it. Yes.
Can you describe the other component besides the internship? I'm not familiar with what you do besides the internship.
Sure, I would absolutely be glad to. What they do is they come out in the spring. They take 2 USC classes, most often from the School of Cinema and Television, but at USC, but they can take it through Thornton School of Music and other things. What I encourage them to do is to take classes that are not going to be available here on Duke's campus. So they get to come out and play with different equipment, meet and integrate with the USC students, and really broaden their experience level. They take my class, which is integrating academic theory and actual film business practices. So we study comic books, film, television, all under a genre perspective. Then they do the internship, and then at the end, we do a conference where they present papers, sitting on a panel like this. They present 15 to 20-minute papers to alumni, industry professionals, and others that are in attendance.
One other question. Why do you have it in the spring and not in the fall? I mean, if you had it in the fall, let's say football, do basketball.
That's a consideration for kids.
I say that too, and people doubt me, but it is a consideration.
Good luck. I hope they enjoy watching. By the way, there's no football team in LA, and yet it, thrives as a city. I mean, I'm not trying to be disparaging about the basketball program, but if you want to watch Duke basketball, then that should be that's I mean. And by the way, you don't have to do this formally. I mean, there are interns every summer who come out and who can informally get internships every summer. So there's a certain amount of self-startingness, and there's a priority. But if you're not willing to put up and sacrifice a lot for this, then please, you know, the doors on the studio are not there to keep people in because it's such a hard job. You know, they don't have gates there. I'm sorry, Glenn, I know you had a question.
But you know, it's actually not, I would disagree with you on one thing. It's not as easy because most of these internships want the students to be getting school credit for
Oh,
tax
no,
reasons.
you're absolutely right.
And-
If you can't get school credit through Duke, that's a big problem.
So
And
if you
usually
just show up in
can't.
the summer and say, I want an internship, and it's not through my program,
No, you're absolutely right about that.
It's a
I
lot
didn't know
harder
whether Duke, at Pitt, we set it up so you can get internship credit, but I'm not sure if that's the case at Duke. And I would recommend, that's what's good about doing this program is you've got the support level that you don't have if you just show up there. It is harder, but, you know, it's worthwhile if you're planning to do it.
And Jim, I'm surprised you didn't mention this, but there's a huge value to doing the Duke and LA program in the spring. If you're interested in doing an internship in the summer, you're in LA to set up those relationships, to have conversations, to make a connection, and take that spring semester right along, which would be much harder to do in vice versa, to go from the summer to the fall. You haven't set yourself up to be in the place to set up the harder part of it. So, you know, if you're looking to get an extended experience, it's easier to go from spring to summer than vice versa.
also Duke in New York is in the fall, and a lot of them actually do both, and so we'd be competing with that directly. And we need to wrap it up, so maybe 2 more questions? Yeah.
Did any of you take any classes in film or any like subject like that while you were at Duke?
I just took one, actually. I mean, almost everything in my life here were wonderful, wonderful English classes, and that was really my life here. But I took one amazing screenwriting class in the spring of my senior year at Duke, so I got a taste of it. But no, I was not. They don't have a film? Do they have a film major here?
What, here?
Program.
It's a
Yeah,
certificate
yeah.
program.
Oh, right. No, I didn't get that. But I certainly have friends who did and loved it. But you know, what I'm saying is you can do a pure liberal arts, you know, Shakespeare-y type major, and then add those elements of film into your life by internships in the summer, or you know, a screenwriting class here or there, that kind of. You know, I don't think you have to have such a total concentration in film classes undergrad at all. In fact, I think taking those pure liberal arts classes to undergrad helps make you a more, you know, complete person, kind of, you know.
Well, the class that changed my life was politics and the media with David Pallet. I mean, he's smarter about film, and ironically, he was in the poli-sci department, but the last 3 years he was in the film program. Smart people knew that and sought him out, and he's launched a lot of careers besides myself. But there's now a lot of people, this Gary Hawkins, I mean, there's great programs here, so it's clearly to do it. I agree with her. No one's ever going to ask you what your degree is. Nobody's going to ask if you're magna cum laude. They're going to ask you to get lunch, gazpacho with no croutons, no sour cream, and chopped and you better get it right. And if you don't get it right, then go and be a banker. So.
Last question.
I was wondering if you do decide to do Duke in LA, what sort of things on campus, whether it be classes or, you know, and to get involved, you know, you're not from LA, you know, do this as well. As you moved out there, it's getting involved.
You mean what things prior to signing up for Duke in LA should you do to
Either into deciding whether or not to do it, or if you do, or you know, if you want to, if you want to.
well, if you're trying to decide whether to do it, you come talk to me as soon as we stop talking, and I will talk you into it. Also, like anybody that's interested or has any questions, since we're running out of time, come up to me now and I'll give you my email address and ask me questions and send me stuff, because I want you to do it. I really, I mean, I've done it long enough that I know what a good experience it is for these people, for the students. And so many of them have said this was the single most important or single best thing I did the whole time I was at Duke.
May I throw in my 2 cents? I'm Carolyn Layton, and I'm the staff assistant for the Film Video Digital Program. So if you have any questions about our program, you can come and call our office or stop by and pull all of us there. And we'd be happy to talk with you about other courses. We've got some great things coming this spring. We have a visiting filmmaker master course with David Carson, who is also an alum, and he just did a film which we showed last spring, and the name is totally leaving me. For the Bible Tells Me So, and it's a documentary about homosexuality and how general society, and particularly religious institutions, regard homosexuality. It's a very strong film. It's won prizes at film festivals and things like that. So he's teaching this master course. We also have Janos Kovacsy, who co-founded the program at the North Carolina School of the Arts in film. And he'll be teaching 2 courses, one in production and one in intermediate narrative production. So those are some other courses that are coming along that are new and really exciting. And then we have the usual exciting courses too, courses in screenwriting and whatever. And I know this is a time where students are book bagging and thinking about what they want to sign up for in the spring. So if you have questions, you can come talk to us in our office. Josh Gibson, who was here earlier, he's our associate director, and he's quite available to talk to students.
But it's much more important to do Duke in LA than any of that. So I wanted, on behalf of the panel, thank everybody for coming. Thank you guys.